The big buzz around the NHL right now is offer sheets. In case you've missed the excitement, the St. Louis Blues just took advantage of the Edmonton Oilers' poor cap situation and sent offer sheets to two of their players, that being forward Dylan Holloway and defenseman Philip Broberg, which the Oilers have officially announced that they will not be matching, meaning that both players will start next season as members of the St. Louis Blues, with the Edmonton Oilers receiving a second and third round pick as compensation. This is rather exciting because despite being a perfectly legal avenue for player acquisition, offer sheets are incredibly rare in the NHL. Throughout the last decade, very few offer sheets have even been attempted, and even less have been successful. So, what exactly is an offer sheet, and why are GMs so hesitant to use them? That is what we will explore today in Hockey 101, Offer Sheets. So what exactly is an offer sheet? An offer sheet is an avenue which teams can use to sign restricted free agents which are unsigned from other teams. As a reminder, or in case you aren't familiar with the terms, a restricted free agent, or RFA, is a player who is either under the age of 27 or has fewer than 7 years of NHL experience. This system is set up in order to ensure that teams are able to keep their young drafted players in the organization for a while, well, at least 7 years, obviously. An RFA functions the same way as a UFA, which is an unrestricted free agent, in the sense that they are a player without a contract on their current team, but they differ in the sense that, unlike an unrestricted free agent who can negotiate with any team in the league, a restricted free agent must do all of their negotiating with the team that holds their rights. That is, except if they are sent an offer sheet. An offer sheet is basically the equivalent of a regular contract offer that a team would make to an unrestricted free agent, except that offer sheets have more stipulations. For one thing, offer sheets have a price for the teams that use them. That is beyond the monetary and cap implications of the contract that they are trying to get the player signed to. If an offer sheet is sent to a player and that player agrees to the offer sheet and the original team that held the player's rights does not agree to the offer sheet, then the player's rights are transferred over to the team that sent the offer sheet. But the original team that held their rights is obligated to receive compensation in the form of one or more draft picks, and this depends on how big the contract is that is being offered to the players. Here is how the chart breaks down. As you can see, as the dollar amounts increase on the contract, so do the amount of picks required for compensation, all the way up to the top bracket, which is a whopping 4 first-round selections for players who were signed to contracts over $11 million per season. As you can imagine, the highest tier of offer sheets are exceedingly rare, even by the already uncommon standard of offer sheets. In recent memory, there has only ever been one attempted poaching of this size, and that happened all the way back in 2012 when the Flyers offered Shea Weber a monster 14-year deal back when those crazy long contracts were still legal. This would, of course, ultimately end up being matched by the Predators at the time, but if this deal had gone through, then the Flyers would have owed the Preds 4 first-round picks. Important to note that these picks are also not able to be lottery protected or conditioned in any way, and must be the original draft picks of the team who signed an offer sheet. Meaning that if a team has multiple first-round picks that they acquired from other teams, if they make an offer sheet, they have to use their first-round pick in that compensation. It can't be the first-round pick acquired from a different team. This obviously isn't just first-round picks. This is every pick that is used in an offer sheet. And this is why we saw earlier that the Blues made a trade with the Penguins to reacquire their own second-round pick, a move which seemed odd at the time in isolation, but made sense when they later announced that they had offer sheeted 2 players from the Oilers. It's also important to note that some RFAs are not eligible to be offer sheeted. Typically, the players that are RFAs that aren't offer sheet eligible are players that have reached RFA status but have not yet reached 3 years of NHL service. You typically see this quite a bit with players that are signed out of college. So basically what happens a lot is that as a bargaining chip, teams will sign a player that is in the NCAA towards the end of the season and have them play a handful of NHL games. This does, in essence, burn 1 year of their contract for RFA, meaning that they obviously can burn through their ELC faster and negotiate for bigger money contracts faster. But even though they burn a year of their contracts, this doesn't count in NHL's eyes as a year of service, so these players are not able to be offer sheeted. Additionally, players that are signed to offer sheets must agree to sign them, meaning that every time that a player has either left via offer sheet or ultimately had their contract offer matched by their original team, they did agree to potentially leave their original team and sign with the team that was offering them the contract. This means that there's a decent chance that there are more offer sheet proposals that we don't ever hear about because the player that is attempting to be offer sheeted ultimately chooses not to sign with the team that is sending them the contract. Finally, when a player does sign an offer sheet, the original team that owned their rights has 7 days to match this offer, in which case when they do, the player is signed to that exact contract that the new team was attempting to sign them at, just with their original team. This is the end result of a vast majority of the attempted offer sheets in league history, as teams are usually not very interested in letting their young talent go. So with that out of the way, why have offer sheets been so rare in the NHL? There are certainly a couple reasons for this. For one, the cost is obviously quite high. If you look at the contract requirements in some of the compensation tiers, you see why teams are so hesitant to pull off these types of moves. The better a player is, the more expensive the payment would be. So while it would be of interest for a team to go after a young superstar, like let's say when Connor Bedard is up as an RFA, a GM might be tempted to pull off an offer sheet. Obviously, it would be huge to get a player of that caliber to join your team while they're so young. But almost certainly, the offer sheet required to sign a player of that stature would be that very top tier, meaning that a team would have to trade 4 unprotected first-round picks, and that is not something that even the most brazen GM would likely be able to stomach. Something else which makes offer sheets so rare is the cap system itself. What I mean is that the cyclical nature of the NHL, because of the cap system, means that teams that are typically high in their competitive window are the ones that have the least amount of cap space, and hence are the ones that typically are the most threatened by an offer sheet. Coincidentally, the teams that have the most cap space and are the most able to use an offer sheet to their advantage are also the teams that are at the bottom of their competitive window, and typically mean that these teams are at the very bottom of the NHL standings. Because of the aforementioned offer sheet rule, even though these teams are the teams which would have the most interest in offer sheeting players, especially because what rebuilding teams want above all else is young talent, because the fact that the draft picks required in compensation need to be the original picks of the team that is sending away the offer sheet, a cruel twist of fate is that the teams that are the most able to utilize this mechanism are the least in position to surrender their own draft picks. To really illustrate this point, let's give a hypothetical. So let's say that, for example, the San Jose Sharks decide to give an offer sheet to, let's say, Moritz Seider, who is still unsigned. And don't worry, Wings fans, this is purely a hypothetical. The Sharks certainly have the cap space and would also certainly love to have a player of this caliber join their team through their rebuild. But the likely contract that would be required to get him would probably be at least in the territory of 2 first-round picks. Now, if you're Mike Greer, would you take that bet? Remember, a team cannot lottery protect offer sheet picks, meaning that the Sharks would need to be confident that this single move would take them outside of the bottom of the league, or they could very well end up giving top 5 picks away in exchange for this offer sheet. This is why, for top-level players, offer sheets are so rare. The teams that have the cap space don't have the draft capital, and the teams that have the draft capital don't often have the cap space. One final reason why offer sheets are so uncommon is the simple fact that other general managers aren't exactly the biggest fan of offer sheets, or more specifically, don't love the idea of losing their good young players to other teams. There have been many reported cases of a kind of unspoken rule regarding the use of offer sheets, or in a way, it's kind of the NHL's equivalent to mutually assured destruction. Each team has the power to do serious damage to another, but they generally avoid it because they know that they have a good chance of the exact same thing happening to them. There have been numerous examples of general managers taking revenge on other managers who dare offer sheet their players through both conventional and unorthodox means. Here's just a few examples. In 2008, Canucks general manager Mike Gillis decided to offer sheet David Backes from the Blues. The St. Louis Blues quickly matched this offer sheet, and then Blues GM John Davidson sent his own offer sheet to Steve Bernier, a player that the Canucks had just acquired that same summer. This too was matched, but it was seen even back then as a clear example of a retaliatory offer sheet move from the Blues. The Blues were not keen on the fact that the Canucks were trying to steal Backes from them, and they in turn offer sheeted Bernier to try to send a message to the Canucks and other players that offer sheeting their players would mean that a team's own players would similarly be targeted. Here's another example. Infamously, in 2007, the Anaheim Ducks were a victim of an offer sheet when they lost Dustin Penner to the Oilers. This was one of the rare successful offer sheets, and Penner did in fact change teams from the Ducks to the Oilers. At that time, the Ducks were managed by Brian Burke, who has never been afraid to voice his opinion and Burke was irate at the move. He flamed then Edmonton GM Kevin Lowe publicly in the media, and Lowe, who was a former player and certainly one that was never afraid to back down from a fight himself, retaliated against Burke in the same manner, and they really had a war of words in their respective media markets throughout that summer. Lowe retaliated in the media and actually escalated it to a step further, insinuating that if Burke really had a problem with him, he would be more than happy to settle their dispute with more than words. Burke apparently not only agreed to this potential fight, but also reached out to Kevin Lowe privately to give him a location and time, and was actually in the process of renting an abandoned barn where the two men could settle their differences. As the story goes, Lowe was actually game to physically fight Brian Burke over the offer sheet, but Commissioner Gary Bettman stepped in and threatened both GMs with indefinite suspension if they went through with their plan to have a fist fight. While this has certainly become a legendary story across the storied career of one of the most entertaining executives in NHL history, it also illustrates, albeit unconventionally, how personally some general managers take offer sheets and the risks that GMs who use them run in making enemies in the league. Now, something that if you are a newer fan or maybe just have more of a recent memory, something that you probably will be more familiar with in the case of offer sheets and retaliation is in 2019, when the Carolina Hurricanes were in a fairly dire cap situation, and reportedly that at that time their owner, Tom Dundon, was not interested in giving out big money contracts. And this was something that the Montreal Canadiens, who had a lot of cap space, were looking to take advantage of when they sent Sebastian Aho a 5-year contract offer sheet with the hopes that the Hurricanes would be unwilling or unable to match. The Canes, of course, did end up matching, and Aho has remained the superstar that he has blossomed into on the Carolina Hurricanes. And they began to bide their time to wait and see what they could do to get revenge on the Canadiens. 2 years later, the Habs were in their own financial difficulties, and the Hurricanes saw this as their time to strike. As the Habs were just coming off of their Cinderella run to the Stanley Cup Finals, the Hurricanes decided to send an offer sheet to former third overall pick Jesperi Kotkaniemi, who was an RFA, and this was a move that the Canadiens ultimately did not end up matching, and the Hurricanes had to send over a first-round pick in compensation, which was, until this most recent attempt by the Blues, the last time that an offer sheet was successful and a player went from one team to another via offer sheet. For Doug Armstrong's part, he has stated that he does not believe that offer sheets are taboo and that he isn't afraid of possible retaliation. He also made this hilarious quip regarding speculation that this offer sheet occurred because Stan Bowman is now GM of the Edmonton Oilers.
Like I think it was reported that I wouldn't have done this to Kenny Holland. That's the truth. Quite honestly, I'd do it to my mother if she was managing the Oilers. My job is to take care of the St. Louis Blues fans and the St. Louis Blues organization.
Whether or not this is true, and the Blues are able to walk away from this saga without any retaliation, remains to be seen. But this situation was also a fairly unique one. Edmonton was in a particularly difficult cap spot, and the Blues were able to sign 2 players to lower tier offer sheet levels, which required no first round picks. Regardless of what you think the Oilers should have done, whether they should have matched or whether or not you think that the Blues made a mistake offering these contracts, I do think that, in my view, this development should be celebrated. Look, I get not being super jazzed about this. If you're an Oilers fan, certainly understandable, but in my view, I think for every other fan base, I do think that offer sheets are a good thing if they are becoming less taboo and more utilized. For one thing, it gives teams another avenue to acquire talent, and for another, it always felt kind of silly to me to have a perfectly legal tool that is just not used because GMs don't like it. It's also objectively good for young players who have such little bargaining power because of the RFA system to profit off of their work and potential and to take some control over their destinies. Also, for hockey junkies like myself who are desperate for any and all transaction news, it's extra fun to just have that extra bit of news to discuss and consume, especially in the dog days like August right now, where we really are bereft of any NHL transaction news at all. We will see if this move sparks another trend in offer sheet acceptance across the league, or if this was just a unique situation and kind of a one-off. But either way, it has been really fascinating to watch this unfold, and it will be really interesting to see what the future holds, if anything, for offer sheets moving forward in the landscape of the